to Robot Unicorn, hosted by my parents, Jess and Scott. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
Hello, everybody. It's Jess here. If you are new to the podcast, because I feel like we have so many new listeners lately, just wanted to introduce myself. I'm a registered psychotherapist from Ontario, Canada, and I talk about all things related to child development, kids' mental health, parenting little kids, and I have been obsessed with this topic for far over a decade. And typically this podcast is run with my husband, Scott, who is an engineer and very logical. And also we're parents of 3 young children, but Scott was unable to make it to this episode today, and we're going to miss him, of course. But we're still going to have a really great conversation, even without his skeptical and humorous sometimes comments. And not to worry, Scott's okay. He's going to be back. He's just taking a few weeks off the podcast. So he will be back and we can hear from him again. But in the meantime, you have me. And I'm so excited to be here with you today and talk about a topic that actually I don't think we've talked about on the show yet, which is so funny to me because this is one of my favorite topics. And I was looking through all the episodes. We've done over 100 episodes, which is crazy. And we've never talked about sleep, except for one episode we did about sleep training, which we can link in the show notes, which was a really great episode. But we've never talked about why kids struggle to sleep, which is wild because as a parent of 3 children myself, I know that sleep is one of the biggest topics for parents. Because being sleep deprived, which we often are as parents, is incredibly difficult. And if I think back to probably my hardest moments in parenthood, a lot of them had to do with being so sleep deprived that it was hard to even function the next day. Especially when you don't sleep all night and then the next day you have to take care of your kids or you have to go to work or you have to just function as a human being. It's really tough. And this one specifically was inspired because a lot of my personal friends and family have been struggling with their toddler or their little child's sleep lately. And they will always ask me, Jess, why? Why won't they sleep? Why are they struggling so much? So I thought having an episode that I could refer them to and you can listen to about the main reasons why kids struggle to sleep with some just simple practical tips in here, I think will be so helpful for you. Hopefully an episode that you keep coming back to as your children get older, because the main reasons kids struggle to sleep are actually the same from babyhood all the way on. And this is an episode I think that you'll just keep coming back to, you'll save. So I'm so excited about it. I can't wait to dive in. So let's dive in. To start, I'm just trying to think of the best way to say this, but kids don't always sleep well. And sometimes part of that is just being a kid, okay? So we need to know that. I feel like, especially when I was a new mom, like 2016, 2017 era, it was all about how do I get my kids to sleep independently? How do I get them to sleep, drowsy, but not awake? How do I make them sleep on their own? And I think that messed with so many of our minds. And I think that's still definitely out there today. This idea that unless a child sleeps through the night, sleeps perfectly, sleeps independently, we're failing as a parent. Okay, so we need to understand that children will wake up in the night sometimes. They'll crawl into your bed. They'll look for you. That's part of being a child and just checking to make sure that they're safe, that they're okay. Now, where sleep can really become a struggle that's above the norm of like once in a while your child climbing into your bed and just like having a bad dream and needing you is when your child just like frequently is waking up multiple times a night, when they're having terrible nightmares. Bedtime is taking hours and hours, and it's so difficult to put your child to bed. That goes above and beyond, I would say, like the typical sleep struggles that are developmentally appropriate and we're seeing in kids. And especially when it's impacting your quality of life as a parent, there are things that we can do and things that we can get curious about to help your child sleep well. So the first reason why kids often wake up in the night, and this is probably the most common, is separation. Okay, so developmental psychology shows us that a child is wired to want to be around people who take care of them. That is how they feel safe. Especially if you think about like your little toddlers, your little preschoolers, all day long, they have a caregiver, whether it's a teacher, a grandmother, or whether it's you, they have someone who takes care of them, who tries to keep them safe. They're never really alone except for bedtime. So when we're putting them to bed, that signals to them the first time all day that they've had to be by themselves. And not only that they have to be by themselves, but that they have to be by themselves for 10 to 12 hours in their bed. This can feel really daunting to a small child. It can feel really overwhelming. So we need to understand that part of the clinging, crying, whining, wanting to stay close to you at bedtime makes sense from a developmental perspective because they feel safest when they are with you. Separation also can become heightened because at bedtime, like it's dark and quiet, there's no distractions, right? So there's nothing for them else to really think about than the fact that they're by themselves. Bedtime is vulnerable. When you're tired, you're more vulnerable. And it can really make a child's system feel frantic. And so then when they see you exit the room, their emotional brain completely takes over and says, I need my parent to be close to me. So whether that makes them scream and cry in their crib, whether it makes them run out of the room and chase you down the hall, whether it makes them just like cry at their door, like, Mommy, come back up. That is all to me a sign of separation struggles. Okay, and so a child can't sleep well when they are feeling threatened, when their body is feeling this kind of state of like restless, anxious, alarm energy. They can't sleep well, right? And that is why they are doing all of these things. It's all in a frantic attempt to keep you close, because when you're close, then they feel safe and they feel like they can fall asleep. So separation struggles often look like crying, panicking, stalling. My kids were great at this, where you get them in bed, you're like, okay, you're situated in bed, it's time for sleep. And then they'd be like, I need water, I need another book, I need this, I need that. And that's all an attempt to keep you close for longer. And also often looks like they can only fall asleep with a parent present. And this behavior is all really communicating, I need you close to me and I don't feel safe with you not with me. Now, for parents, what you need to know is it doesn't mean that the only solution is staying with your child forever and ever, okay? So just because they're struggling with separation doesn't mean that you have to always sleep with them forever. Now, that is a personal choice that sometimes works really well for a family. For example, in our home, I do really enjoy, and I've always enjoyed, laying next to my daughters until they fall asleep. We have our routine. It's pretty down pat. And once the routine is over and it's time for them to sleep, I'm in their bed next to them. They have kind of like this double bunk bed, so there's room for me. Otherwise, I'd be on the floor. And I turn around, so I'm actually not facing them anymore. And I say, I will lay here. It's no more talking time. I will lay here with you until you fall asleep. And I turn around, I do this like weird position, and then they like hold my hand. But it helps me not to be face to face because then it signals to them, okay, you do need to try and sleep now. And I've done this with my younger two kids forever. And now for the most part, they fall straight asleep. They know when I set that boundary that it's time for them to sleep. And I enjoy laying in their bed next to them. Like for me, laying in that dark room next to them, and sometimes I'll go on my phone. Sometimes I'll, answer some emails while I'm in there. It doesn't take too long. It's like maybe, the whole thing altogether is 30 minutes, including the routine. But I really like that quiet time. Now, there was a time in my life where that did not work because I had babies and I could not be laying with my older kids because Scott would be traveling for work. He'd be gone. He'd be working late. And I couldn't possibly lay with my 4-year-old and put a crying newborn baby down to sleep at the same time. So two things can be true. It's okay to lay with your child to sleep. And eventually, what I have found in so many of the clients that I work with and my own children is there comes a time when your child, when you've been laying with them to sleep, says, okay, I think I can try it on my own now. And you can leave the room for a little bit and you come back and you can check on them. But eventually, children do desire independence. But that independence, I think it's Gordon Neufeld who says this independence only comes through knowing that they can trust and rely on you in your relationship. So if you are laying with your child to sleep and it's working for you and you feel good about it and you like that quiet snuggles or that time with your child, that's okay. I think a lot of like the media and a lot of things that's out there are going to make you feel like that's not okay. That's okay if that's working for you. Now, if you're in the situation I was in when I had little babies, a traveling husband for work, and an older kid who needed to go to sleep who also had separation struggles, there's other things we can do. So the key is you want to imagine that there's like this invisible string or this bridge between you and your child. And so the question is, how do they feel close to me and cared for by me, even when we're not together? So those are the things that we need to do so that the child knows, mommy or daddy still loves me. They still care for me, even when they're not here in the room. Okay, so I'm going to give you one tip for this. And I call this the stuffy check-in. And basically what you can do is say, okay, I'm going to go. Like, so they're in their bed. You've done their whole routine. It's all snuggly and good. And they're cuddled up in their bed. I need to go. I need to go check on the baby, or I need to go whatever. And I will be back to check on you. Okay, so that I will be back to check on you puts you as the parent back in the position of leadership. The child doesn't need to leave their bed to go looking for you. The child doesn't need to wander around the house or cry at the door of their room and wonder if you're ever coming back, right? So it shortens that gap between the time when you're leaving and you're coming back. And then you say to your child, and you'll know that I was back to check on you because I am going to bring you a special stuffy from downstairs. And I love the stuffy because then what I say to my kids is once I've brought them the stuffy, if you miss me, you can snuggle it. And so for some kids, you need to do like multiple stuffies, or you can do whatever you want. I think a friend of mine, she heard that tip and she decided to like print off all these Paw Patrol characters and cut them out. And she would just like bring her son like these Paw Patrol cutouts in his bed. That's fine too. But the idea is that you need your child to know that you've been coming back to check on them, and it really helps them sleep well in their bed. Okay, so that's one idea for separation anxiety. If you want more, definitely you could check out our Instagram. We have lots of suggestions, or our bedtime course is like filled with suggestions for separation struggles. But for the sake of time on this episode, that's my tip for you for that. Now, let's go into the second reason why kids often struggle with sleep. This is fears. Okay, they're scared. Now, what we need to know about little kids is around ages like 2 to 3, sometimes even younger, their imagination is developing at rapid speeds. And this is one of the things I love most about kids. It's like kids have the best imagination, right? They can imagine all sorts of things. And what can happen in those years is that imagination and reality can get kind of confused, right? So they can imagine things like bad guys and monsters and like these really creepy animals, and it can feel real, right? And they can see a shadow in their room and believe that it is real. And so sometimes kids struggle with sleep because their imagination has grown so much that they are scaring themselves with the thoughts that they're having. Now, fear intensifies at night because there's less stimulation, there's less distraction, it's dark, right? So they can really have a lot of time to think about all of these things that are going on inside of their head. And especially I find for like our more sensitive kids or more like highly creative kids is that this can be especially tough. The other thing is that our children are also processing things that they saw during the day or things that they experienced. So if they had a particularly stressful or busy day, we might see more of those fears come out at night. If they saw something for the first time and they weren't really scared about it earlier that day, like a movie, but now all of a sudden one of the characters from the movie that they saw is like coming back in their head. And now that it's dark and they're alone and they're tired, all of a sudden now that character's a little scary. It wasn't scary earlier. Now it feels scary. So some common fears that we see in kids are darkness, monsters, bugs, or like something's in the room. Bad dreams. So sometimes it comes out in a dream and then they wake up in the middle of the night, or they're thinking about something stressful in their life, or they're thinking about something that they've seen. So how to tell if it's a fear? I mean, sometimes your child just tells you. I remember our daughter used to be really afraid at night and she would just always have these same fears. So lava, the Grinch, shiny crab from Moana. These are all things that really scared her. And she would kind of repeat these on a cycle every night. She'd be like, oh, I'm scared of Shiny the crab. I'm scared of lava. I'm scared of the Grinch. So your child might be telling you their fears. They might also ask for the lights to stay on, for the door to be open, for reassurance. They might be waking up crying from a bad dream. They might want you to check underneath their covers or underneath their beds to make sure there's no monsters there. Those are all signs that maybe your child's waking up or having a hard time sleeping because they're scared of something. So what we need to understand is that the fears are communicating, I'm not feeling safe, I need to talk this through, or I need your help to support me, to help me understand where the truth is. Okay, because one of the big mistakes that I see parents making around bedtime fears is that they kind of feed into the fear a little bit. So, for example, monsters, right? Or for my daughter, it was like snakes or bugs. She'd be like, I know that there's snakes in my bed. And what I used to do is be like, let me check. Well, there's not going to be snakes in your bed. You know, we live in Ontario. In our house, like where we live, it's very, 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 very unlikely that you're going to have a snake in your bed, right? But I would check her bed. Oh, okay, I see there's no snakes. I checked. But that doesn't actually help her, because what that says to her is that there is a possibility that there is a snake in my bed. That's why mommy's checking. What she actually needed from me in that moment was to be clear and firm, actually last week's episode, and direct, and say to her, there are no snakes in your bed. There is not going to be snakes in your bed. Trust me. I promise you. And then to get curious, why do you think there might be snakes in your bed? Help me understand. What's the scariest part of having a snake in your bed, right? So getting curious with her while also being the one to narrate the truth is important. And it's important even from a young age, you can teach your children that just because you fear something, just because you think it, does not make it true. So we can help kids differentiate between thoughts and facts. And we can be the one to speak the facts until our child's able to kind of come up with those facts or get curious about those facts by themselves. We have, again, this episode is not a big pitch for the bedtime course, but it's just we have a bedtime course that covers all of these things in so much more detail. So it's hard to not draw attention to that. But in the course, we have lots of other examples, like doing things like drawing out the fears during the day or role playing out what you can do if you're scared at night. So there's just lots of things that we can do for fears. But the important part is a child needs you to take the lead, stay curious about the fears, but also helping them find the truth behind them can be helpful. Hey friends, so at pickup last week, our daughter asked Scott a truly kind of tricky question in front of her younger siblings. Scott was telling me that when he heard a question like this, he used to panic, but this time he had a plan. And he said to our daughter, "Thank you for asking. Let's talk tonight when we've got privacy." And that's a line that he learned straight from our new body safety and consent course at Nurtured First. So this new body safety and consent course is taught by me. So Jess, if you listen to this podcast, you know me. I'm a child therapist and a mom of 3, and I have taught body safety and consent education for years. This course takes all my years of experience teaching this education and gives you calm, age-appropriate language for body parts, consent, and boundaries. You'll learn how to teach your kids that no means no. You'll learn how to teach them to read facial cues. You'll talk about safe and unsafe touch, and you'll even teach them about their uh-oh feeling. There's guidance inside this course for the real life stuff, like tickling that goes too far, and even the difference between a secret and a surprise. We made this course at Nurtured First because research shows that body safety education helps kids speak up sooner, and we want that for our family, for Scott and I, but also for you. So check the course out at nurturedfirst.com/bodysafety, and to save 10%, use the code ROBOTUNICORN. And just full disclosure here, we are the creators of this course, and we're so proud of it. So now we have the third reason that we're going to talk about today. This one's really important from babies all the way up to our bigger kids. And this one is sleep pressure. Okay, so just to be clear, because I remember I said this to someone once and they're like, so we pressure them to sleep? No, that's not what it's about. But sleep pressure is the biological drive to sleep that builds the longer we're awake, right? So when you wake up in the morning, you don't really have a lot of sleep pressure because you've just slept all night and your body's like, I'm good to be awake. But as the day goes on, your body gets more and more tired, more and more ready for bed because that sleep pressure is building up. If your child still has a nap, then it builds up. Your child has a nap. Now their sleep pressure needs are lower again until it's time for bed. But sleep pressure is kind of tedious in a way where if your child is not tired enough, it makes it very difficult for them to sleep. And if they're way too tired, it also makes it really difficult for them to sleep. So it's about trying to find that right amount of time for your child that helps them sleep well. And so sleep pressure is really important to understand. And I would say this is honestly where I start with a lot of parents when their child's not sleeping well, because often when we get curious, the child's either going to bed way too late or way too early or somewhere in between, or their nap is too long and it's making bedtime actually need to be later, but the parent still has them going to bed at the same time they've always gone to bed. And this can lead to hours-long bedtimes. This 1,000% happened to me with my oldest, because when I had my oldest, my first child, I didn't know anything about sleep. I was a therapist for sure, but sleep was just something that I had never really dealt with as a therapist before. And so when she wouldn't sleep well, when she was 2.5 years old, and bedtime was literally taking us hours every single night, I felt really stuck. And I was like, what am I doing wrong here? I have a routine. I have my boundaries. She feels really connected with me. So why is it that when I put her to bed at 7:30 at 2.5 years old, she's up till 9:30? I couldn't understand. And so that was actually where my kind of obsession with understanding sleep started. Because at the time, I felt like the only options I had was fight with her till 9:30 till she eventually falls asleep, or leave her in her room and let her cry until she fell asleep, which I did try a few times and just did not feel good for me. It didn't feel like the right choice, the right way to help my daughter who I love so much to sleep. So the more I dug into the research on why kids struggle to sleep, the more I realized that sleep pressure had such a big role to play. And that's why my daughter was struggling so much. It was because she had this really long nap at daycare, and that long nap at daycare was now impacting her ability to be able to fall asleep on time. And I had this expectation in my head, which as parents, how often do we have that? Where we have this expectation or this rule that we have put in our own heads of, this is the time my child should fall asleep, or this is how my child should behave. And I feel like so much of the work I actually do as a therapist now is helping parents with these rules that we put in our own head. And I had that rule because a friend of mine had a daughter, and her daughter went to bed at 7:30 every night, no matter what, even if she napped. And that worked for her. So I thought, well, that should work for me too. So much of the work I do as a therapist is understanding these rules and then asking ourselves, is this actually developmentally appropriate? Or am I just having this rule for my child because I heard it somewhere and I think that they should go to bed at this time, but that's not actually fair, or that's not actually a developmentally appropriate rule. Or maybe what works for another child doesn't work for my child, and that's okay. So that's what I had to really figure out as I was trying to figure out those sleep pressure needs for my daughter. And what I realized was, if I can ask daycare to give her a shorter nap, then if she has a shorter nap at daycare, and thankfully her daycare was willing to work with me, I know not all daycares can. And if they can't, then we have to change things that we're doing at home. But if she could have the shorter nap, then I could put her to bed, around the same time, maybe a little bit later. And all of a sudden she would actually be able to sleep well at night, because it wasn't about my routine. It wasn't about my boundaries. It was about the fact that she wasn't tired enough. And the more I put her to bed way too early for her, the more worked up she would get, the more she would feel that separation, because she knew she was going to lay in bed for like a couple hours being unable to sleep. So then she would start to have that separation anxiety and want me to stay close. And then I would get frustrated and get angry at her. And just this cycle just like kept going on. So that's where it's really important to get curious about sleep pressure and ask yourself if your child is going to bed at a time that makes sense for them. Now, something that I do say to parents a lot is, it's actually good for your child to take like maybe 20 minutes or so to fall asleep. So you do their whole routine, you put them to bed, and it takes them about 20 minutes to fall asleep. That's actually a good sign. If your child falls asleep like instantly as soon as you put them to bed, sometimes, not always, some kids just are like that. My one daughter is like that. She always falls asleep instantly. But sometimes that can be a sign that they're overtired. And so another thing that you can really do for the sleep pressure is just start to track. Start to track it. Write it on the notes app on your phone. They went to bed at this time today. This is how they slept through the night. Just in a way that's like helping you try and find that right amount of wake time for your child. And it does get easier as they get older and as they drop the nap. I always secretly was like happy when my kids dropped the nap, because then I was like, this is so much better for my brain. I know you can go to bed at 7 or even 6:45. When they would drop the nap, I would give them a pretty early bedtime. And at least I knew it was like reliable, like you're going to go to bed at this time every night. My job is just to kind of keep you awake during the day when you start to crash. But yeah, so trying to keep track of what's working for your child is really helpful. Okay, sensory needs are another reason why kids often struggle with sleep. And so I think about this for our highly sensitive kids. Sometimes, for like a really easy example, for some kids, roughhousing helps them sleep better. I say to the parents, and often it's the dads, go for it, roughhouse, because they need to get that energy out right before they go to sleep, and that actually helps them sleep well. For some kids and their nervous systems, roughhousing right before bed can lead them to an activated nervous system for like 2 hours. So we have to be mindful of the child's sensory needs. And part of that, I'm looking at, do they get enough time outside? Do they have enough movement during the day? Sometimes they're not tired enough because they haven't actually moved their body and ran around enough during the day. I look at, are the sheets right? Like just simple things like that. Like for some kids, they can't sleep because their PJs feel scratchy or their sheets don't feel quite right. So getting curious about the sensory needs of your child is huge. Finally, another reason why kids often wake up at night is life change. So I can't even count the amount of times that I've had parents come to me and say, Jess, I just had a baby and now my toddler won't sleep, right? So when they go through something big in their life, it often comes out at bedtime, just like even for us, right? Like when I'm stressed out about something or even excited, like I'm still kind of like a baby at heart, whereas I'm really excited about something, I have a hard time sleeping the night before. Or if I know I have a big day the next day or something that's making me nervous is happening, I have a hard time sleeping the night before. And it's the same thing for our kids. So we need to remember that our kids have all the emotions, but they actually don't have the tools to deal with them. And so often when they're most vulnerable, which is bedtime, and have the most time to think, these thoughts and the stresses and the changes in their life, they will come out. And we see it at bedtime. So with the life changes like moving, parents are getting a divorce or separating, maybe you're even on vacation, that's a change, or you're having a new baby, you're pregnant, or you're going to have a baby soon, or you just had a baby. All of these things can actually impact your child's sleep. And so what I look at there is this just like a short-term thing where maybe the child's just not sleeping well for a little bit. They just need to adjust to the new routine. Maybe they need a little change in routine so that, okay, things have changed. We're changing the routine. And now this is the new routine that you can rely on. Do they need to process some of these changes during the day? Having that really connected time during the day to talk about things that are tricky or new or tough can also be really helpful for your kids. So keeping in mind that kids often, even if they're not naming that this change is tough for them or that it's new or exciting or that it's just making their brain spin a little bit, it can come out at bedtime. So we want to get curious about big life changes as well. So there's just so much more I could say about sleep. But before I wrap up, I wanted to say this. In my, 9 years of parenting, the times when I have not liked the way that I've behaved as a parent the most is when I've been sleep deprived or when my children have been struggling with sleep. And that's just the honest truth. And a big part of it is because when our children aren't sleeping well, or they're keeping us up for hours, or their bedtime is taking hours and it's a screaming match, we are also often at our most vulnerable. We're tired, we're exhausted, we're looking forward to being in our bed or having that time for ourselves or time with our partner or time with our friends. And so it's very common for us as parents to have the hardest time keeping our cool when our children are going to bed. And I know I could do a whole podcast series probably just on trying to keep our cool during bedtime. But as we wrap up, I wanted to say too, like when we are unable to keep our cool and we're yelling at our kids and we're not showing up as the leader that we want to be, that also puts our kids into a bit of a state of alarm, right? They will sense that we're not confident in our boundaries or that we can't hold the boundaries or that they have to, walk on eggshells. And when they feel that, they become sillier, they become more dysregulated, they become more frantic and they cling and they cry and they whine more. And so much about helping our kids at bedtime is also about helping ourselves at bedtime. Finding those little ways that you can care for yourself so that you can be confident in the boundaries that you're setting. You can be confident helping your kids with their fears or their separation struggles or their big life changes because you have the tools to keep yourself calm. So that being said, I wanted to end with just a few things that have helped me as a parent because I have had my fair share of sleepless nights. And what once was like in the earliest days of parenting, if I was not sleeping, which I didn't sleep for like my first 2.5 years basically of parenting until I started using this approach that we teach here, I would just always be so anxious. I would feel like I was never going to sleep again. I would cry. I'd get upset. I'd yell. And now when my kids have nights where they don't sleep well, I remember that I have a sense of control and a few things that I tell myself. Don't make decisions at 2 a.m. Do not make a decision for something new that you're going to do at 2 a.m. because it's not going to go well. You're going to probably end up leaving them to cry. You're not going to feel good about it. And in the morning, you can make a plan. And then I would always tell myself, and the sun will come back out in the morning. So even if tonight sucks and it's awful and they're having like a split night and they're up for hours, I can handle it. It's one night. And then in the morning, when we wake up and the sun is out, I can go back to what I know about sleep, and you can go back to what you know about sleep. You can take the course, you can look at our blogs, and I can make a plan that's going to work for our family, and I can implement that plan starting tomorrow. But giving myself that time so that I was not frantically Googling or trying to change something at 2 a.m. really helped me. Another mantra that really helped me was, even if I can't sleep, I can rest. I would say this to myself while I was rocking my babies to sleep. And I'd be so tired and it would be the middle of the night and I'd want to go back to my own bed. I'd be rocking them to sleep and I would just say, Jess, it's okay. You can't sleep right now, but you can rest. And I would close my eyes and I would just try to imagine the way that the rocking chair felt or the bed felt or the floor, and just try and imagine myself just letting rest come over my body and knowing that rest is important too. It's okay to rest. That does something and is nourishing for your body as well, even when you can't sleep. And when I tell you that mantra saved my life, I mean it. That truly helped get me through 3 kids who all didn't sleep well as babies and now all sleep great, thank goodness. But it really helped to get me through. So I hope that those mantras can help you as well. And finally, what I would always tell myself is, if it's working, it's working. So like I told you off the beginning of this episode, I like to lay with my 2 youngest kids. Now my middle child doesn't always want me to lay with her anymore. That's great. She's yearning for independence. She's at that stage where she's ready to fall asleep on her own or have her bed to herself. And that's great. Sometimes she wants me, sometimes not. And eventually, very soon, she's going to be fine to sleep on her own all the time, like my oldest. But it's working for me right now. I like that quiet time in their room. I find it's actually very soothing for me and I look forward to it. But if it wasn't working for whatever reason, it would also be okay for me to say, I need to make a change. So if it's working, it's working. And if it's not working, it's okay to make a change. And there's options for you that are not just wait it out and never sleep or let my child scream and cry it out. There are options in between that work from a developmental and attachment lens. And I really hope you can see that after this episode. So I just want to say thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. This episode was a true pleasure for me. I deeply love talking about sleep, and I hope that you took something away from it. And please let us know. Send us an email, write a review, send me a DM on Instagram. I would love to hear if this episode was valuable for you and helpful, and if there's more that you would love to know about sleep. Also, make sure to check out the show notes. We'll put the bedtime course there, which is 4+ hours of material all about bedtime. So you'll definitely find that helpful if you're in the trenches of sleep deprivation. But we'll also put some free blogs and other resources there as well for you. All right, I'm so looking forward to talking to you again next week. I'm so glad you're here, and thank you for your time today.
Hey friends, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We are glad that you are here. If you enjoyed today's episode and found it interesting, we'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and a review. Scott and I actually sit down together and read them all. A 5-star rating helps us share our podcast and get these important messages out there. Thank you so much for listening, and we can't wait to talk to you again next time.